social movement in such a way. I was in Paris giving a lecture in March, and the Democrats abroad, France, which tends to be leftist, progressive, folks who gave up on America, moved over there, but still involved in U.S. politics vis-a-vis voting, who says you can't critique him too hard. It's cannon fodder for the enemy, as though he's the Messiah. Right? And so there's no willing to bring a hard, unrelenting critique of him in such a way. And he's consistently proven himself to be cowardly when it comes to defending the poor and around the questions of race. Consistently. His speeches on race have been deeply problematic. That Father's Day speech, both of them, the last two Father's Days, were terrible. There's a general rule in the black church. On Father's Day, if it's not any other day of the year, you find one good Negro and you say that brother is doing the right thing. You lift him up, you celebrate him. It is a cultural norm. We understand this inside the church. You would never go inside a Jewish community, any other ethnic community, and not acknowledge the ethnic protocol. He would go into nobody else's community and do that. So he gives up, stop feeding your kids Popeyes, don't drink Kool-Aid. This completely trafficking in neoliberal stereotypes of black families without any form of social critique. Right? So critiquing hip-hop. #1 kill of African-American men since 1969 has been handgun violence. Tupac and Biggie weren't even born. Right? So there must be some what King calls social misery. And so he's consistently proven himself power. Black establishment is going to protect him. Neoliberals are going to protect him. And then those of us who are on the outside bring a critique, they push back. Secondly, I think there's been a seduction of social networking. My friends who are professors now teaching social movements, their students respond by saying, Obama is a social movement, Facebook is a social movement, MySpace is a social movement. And the problem with that is ahistorical, but also we have a generation of young people who have grown up, as CB has so brilliantly pointed out to me, you got a generation of people who have grown up who see neoliberalism as a form of progressivism. It is the progressivism. And so in that kind of terrain, it becomes difficult to organize. Lastly, I think the other pushback against of us who do organize, there's, again, a lack of willingness to risk everything. There's just a fundamental resistance around sacrifice because you get it every day, right? You get it every day on television, like through the kind of marketing that we get. Children start getting it. It's the work of Henry Giroux. Children start marketing to my children, and you're gonna figure this out. 7 months? Yeah. Okay, about one. Can't read, but know a McDonald's sign when they see it. Right? So that's because of the marketing in the children. They've been seduced in such a way that they see themselves as consumers. So I think all of that. I think the real organizing question is, nothing replaces low technology, labor-intensive organizing. You got to knock on some doors. You got to put your shoulder to the plow and give everything that you possibly can as it relates to organizing. Last story. There's a little church in Bed-Stuy, a Church of God in Christ, of which I'm ordained in. My grandfather was an elder in the Church of God in Christ, and my great-grandfather were elders, right? So I have whatever. So I need to go into a little church. I need certain kind of cathartic response, and so I need to go somewhere, speak in tongues, and nobody know who I am, right? So I go in and I sit at the back of the church, and the mother of the church is standing around and says, "We're going to do a 24-hour prayer list." I said, "Okay, this is interesting. About 25 folks in there. We can get 24 hours in." And so the prayer list is this: pray that the ACLU stays out of the church's building. Pray that God will make marriage between, the government will make marriage between a man and a woman. Now, I know these people. I've been with them all my life. Mother doesn't know who the ACLU is. But given the fact that we've had a significant study of the black church since a Black Metropolis by St. Clair Drake and Horace Clayton in 1945, right? Study before that, Arthur Fawcett, 1935. We haven't had really serious studies of the black church, and there is no real database on black churches. So that means somebody went door to door, knocking, got lists, built relationships with mother, and this is the prayer list. Right? And so I think that is, they're right, they've studied us, and I think we have to return to those methodologies. So, last set of questions is around my role around both here at the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture, I run I call it Bible Study Without the Bible, a group called Spiritual Not Religious, where we're kind of walking through religious texts, looking at Felix Adler. Nathan and I have been in a conversation about some kind of writing text or pamphlet around this. Many of the people, the definition of killing the Buddha, I think the tagline is that for those who the church makes them want to throw up or something like that.
Snap you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, on one hand, we got the religious right. On the other hand, there's an entire generation of people who are suspicious and righteously so of the religion, and who define themselves as spiritual, not religious. Could you kind of lay a little bit out about believer beware, the role of killing the Buddha, and is there a place? What do we discern out of that community for the building of social movements?
Let me take up. Let me take up a couple of those points. One, I just want to start with sacrifice. What you're talking about, sacrifice, and I know because we've talked about this, but one of the things, I mean, Pat Robertson's a sort of a special case. Pat is a very tragic figure. His father, Absalom Willis Robertson, Dixiecrat senator from Virginia, vice president in his day of the family. Pat never quite measured up. Pat's real dream in life was to be a businessman, and all this religious stuff is secondary. And if he could only have made it in business, we would all have been spared a lot. It's like, Hitler in art school. But that actually sort of goes to this point, because Pat is sort of a cynical character, right? But when you talk about sacrifice, so many of these folks on the religious right, they're not cynical. You gave the examples. I mean, the African examples go back further. These folks who are doing really extreme missionary work and dedicating their lives to this. And when I was when I wrote about the family by joining them and becoming a member, and lived with a group of guys. All from wealthy families, because that's sort of what they recruit, who, that's it, they were just doing this full time, and they were going to do this for as long as it takes. They also think in centuries, by the way. I mean, this goes to the other misconception a lot about the religious right, is we tend to think of the rapture Christians, the folks who say it's left behind, Jesus is coming back tomorrow. There's a whole big movement within the religious right that says Jesus isn't coming back until we make this world godly for 1,000 years. Now that idea, by the way, inspired a lot of abolitionists in the 19th century. And today it inspires people who are working in Uganda and Somalia and Kenya and Nigeria doing this really reactionary work. So they are doing that sacrifice. And they're doing that sacrifice and doing that long, slow work. And actually, just to speak also to what you said about black churches. I mean, you said somebody's been knocking on the door. Well, we know who it is. Tony Perkins, head of the Family Research Council, guy sort of infamous.
According to Robbie Jones, my alter ego.
Yeah, exactly. So you can go back in that closet and come out, and he'll be Tony Perkins. This guy who infamous in Louisiana politics for his ties to David Duke and so on, has rebuilt this huge religious right organization by going around to every little predominantly African-American church he can find and saying, hey, we want to help you. Hey, we'd like to give you influence. We'd like to help you speak to your congressman. We'd like to help you talk about the sanctity of marriage. And they're doing it. We see David Quo, who is a really interesting character. He was a special assistant to Bush, first term. The guy who was really implementing faith-based initiatives. Wrote a book called Tempting Faith, which is in many ways a good book because he's very honest. He says, look, I'll tell you the truth. This became a machine for buying black churches. That's what it was. That's what we knew it was. That's what we spoke of it as. That's what we were doing. And, you know, you can see that there's a program now the Justice Department still has going, by the way,